Hi, I'm Sheila Layton. Welcome to the Beyond Coincidence Show, where every moment holds a miracle and we talk about seeing the hand of God in our lives. Call it a God wink or a tender mercy or whatever you want. Everyone on this show has seen the hand of God or their higher power in their lives in a very real and personal way. Welcome, everyone. Today, my cute guest is Zoe Plzak. She is a Christian content creator and math PhD student who shares about faith, modest fashion, mocktails, and everyday joy. Although she didn't grow up in the LDS Church, she has developed a deep appreciation for the beauty of the Latter-day Saint faith and culture. Zoe is passionate about cultivating a welcoming, Christ-centered community where people from different Christian backgrounds can grow together. Her work focuses on planting seeds, pointing people toward Jesus, and loving truth in a way that's gentle, compassionate, and rooted in grace. So welcome, Zoe. I'm so happy to chat with you today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
And Zoe's just so cute. Zoe, tell people, what is your Instagram?
It's Zoe Zap on Instagram.
So like ITSZOEZAP.
Yes.
It's Zoe Zap. Yeah, so cute. She's really cute. You're going to want to go follow her. So Zoe,
You.
tell me, what does a day in the life of Zoe look like? I know you're a student. Where do you go to school? What's all the fun things you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm currently a PhD student at the University of Utah. So I'm doing a math PhD and I'm in my third year. And so life has changed a lot really quickly. Every semester is different for me. Usually I teach one class a semester. And so I'll be on campus working with the undergrads, teaching some sort of math class. And then on top of that, I sometimes take classes myself, sometimes I don't. And then I'm also spending a lot of time in meetings, working on research. I'm about to do my dissertation proposal, which is
Oh, wow.
really exciting.
How long have you been working on your dissertation?
2.5 years. So I have another two and a
Oh,
half.
this is
So
exciting though,
really long
right?
degree. Yes, yeah, it's a big milestone. I'm officially getting the focus of it approved and my preliminary research they're going to sign off on sort of thing.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's super exciting. So what's the end goal?
The end goal, I would love to be a
Like in the
teacher.
perfect world of Zoe.
Yeah, I would love to stay at the college level and be a college professor. My mom taught special ed for many years, and then she switched to being an art teacher. And so the ability to communicate and explain concepts has always been really important to me. She always really focused on making sure that when I was communicating, I was concise and I was explaining things well and people understood me, because it was so important to her, working with child
Right.
behavior, just being able to communicate with people. And I've learned in my time in the math world that when you have a bad teacher, or even if you don't have a bad teacher, but you have sometimes kids, they take a week-long vacation with their family and they just miss a week of school, no big deal, or
Right.
they're sick and they're home for a few days. That can make the difference between being able to do math as an adult and not even being able to add 2 plus 2. And it's not that
Right.
you're dumb and it's not that you're just bad at math. It's just those little 2 days of school you miss, and all of a sudden it makes or breaks it. So I really
Yes,
want to
that's
be
so
able to
interesting.
teach math well.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you'd say that because literally just last night, my husband and I, he doesn't like to read. He's a businessman, he's super smart, but he doesn't like to
Mm-hmm.
read. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, he has to read documents at work and stuff. But just last night, we were talking about that. And he grew up on a farm in a rural community. And so they missed a lot of school in the fall. And he
Mm-hmm.
goes, I do not know how to sound out words very well, like his phonics. He says, I must have missed the whole phonics section. He says, because I have a really hard time sounding out words. I mean, he's 60, right? And
Yeah.
this is sort of the first time we've had this conversation. I knew he didn't like to read, and I'm like, so you're right. If you miss stuff, it can affect your adult life. And he doesn't like to read, which is
Mm-hmm.
really sad because the whole world can open up before you for reading, but he just doesn't like it because he struggles with it, which is so interesting.
Yeah.
So the fact that you are going to be able to be a good communicator because your mom was, that's a gift. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
definitely
Zoe.
the goal.
Yeah, good for you. Oh, I'm so excited for you. So that's kind of a couple years down the road still though, right?
Yes, yeah. I'm not done. I'm about halfway through my degree. And then there's probably another year or two of like additional qualifications before you can start to be a professor. So stretch goal.
Stretch goal. Yeah, well, you've got a goal. That's awesome. All right, Zoe. So let's go back and tell me what was life like growing up for you in your home? Where did you grow up? How many kids? Where did you fit in? Did religion play a part? All the things.
Yeah. So I'm from Wisconsin originally. I grew up in like a really suburban, safe city. And I feel like I had a really wonderful upbringing. Like it was such a privilege to have loving parents and a stay-at-home mom for a while who read to me and things like that. But I will say religion did not really play a strong part in my upbringing. It's my sister and then my parents, and everybody has their own beliefs in my family. My dad is like a really, really staunch atheist.
Oh, wow.
He really values logic and science, and no one has ever been able to convince him that the argument for God fits logically into his worldview. And so he like just doesn't think it's logical, which is fascinating to me because I think the
Yeah.
opposite. And so we have that freedom to disagree. My
And
mom
that's
was
that's
raised
huge, right?
Catholic.
That
Yeah,
freedom
yeah.
to agree to disagree is, not everyone can do that. And so that's really
Hmm.
beautiful that you and your dad can love each other and have different opinions, but still respect each other. That's a great thing to learn, especially as young as you are. That's going to bode well for you, I think.
Yeah, and I think the great thing is that even though my dad thinks it's illogical, he doesn't think that you're stupid if you believe in it.
Nice.
And like likewise for me, I don't think that my dad is stupid for not
No.
thinking that my views are logical or having things like having views that differ from mine. And so not thinking that something makes sense is not the same thing as thinking the person who holds that belief is flawed.
Right.
So I really
So
value
it's
that
mutual respect. Yeah.
lesson. Yeah.
And what
And,
about your
my
mom?
mom's Catholic, or she grew up Catholic. I think she would probably call herself a Christian now, but her faith is really important to her. But she's not as much of a churchgoer. I think part of that stems from a lot of just hurt and like pain from like the church community of people being really unkind or judgmental and making her feel like it's safer to just believe in private than to
Yeah. So you'd say
you
she's
know
probably more spiritual than religious.
yeah, and she reads her Bible, she believes in
Okay.
Jesus Christ, but that church community can be a bit of a challenge when people are unwelcoming. And I
Right.
think my sister falls along those lines a little bit too. She has her faith, but I don't know if she would necessarily call herself like a weekly church goer, but she still really cares about the beliefs.
She's still Christian. She believes in Christ
Yeah.
and to be a good person,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And so there was never any sort of obligation growing up to go to church. There was never anything like banning me from church. If I wanted to go, I could. If I didn't want to go, I didn't have to. And also, my sister and I went to different schools. And so I was in public school and she was in Catholic school. So
Oh,
we got
interesting.
different kind of religious upbringings school wise.
Now,
And
why
that
was
was
that?
mainly because yeah, it was mainly because I had a speech impediment growing up, and the Catholic school wasn't able to help me with it. So my
Oh, okay.
parents pulled me from it really early so that I could have a speech therapist at school. And my sister didn't need it, so they kept her there because it was a good school.
Oh, wow, that's fascinating. So she had all the Catholic teachings then going to school,
Hmm.
and you just went to public school, and so you didn't go to church together as a family.
No, not really. I think we went on Easter with extended family, but not on like an average Sunday.
Yeah. So would your mom did you learn prayers? Did she talk of God like at home sort of on her own without the actual community?
Yeah, I don't know if it was like a regular conversation. There's a lot of things that she has told me she did for me as a kid that I just don't remember. So a
Yeah.
lot of
Well,
it's my
yeah.
own memory. I do know that she told me that I originally was in like Sunday school lessons on like a Wednesday. So it wasn't Sunday, but
Yeah.
I'd go to a kids primary religious education class. And I think I did that for a couple of years and I just don't remember it. So there was some attempt at like teaching me, but once I was old enough to kind of like decide for myself around like preteen, teenage years, I told my parents I didn't want to go. And so they respected that and they let me stop going.
Okay, so you stopped going. Okay,
Mhm.
so let's move on to as you got older. Um, did you just innately believe in a higher power or believe in God, even though your dad didn't? Did your dad actually say, I don't believe in God, or you just sort of knew that he didn't?
No, he was open about it. My parents did get divorced when I was older. So around then there was kind of a more obvious conversation about it of like my dad saying, I don't like the church. I really don't believe in God. I'm not going to church. And my mom saying, I do like church. I do believe in God.
Right.
And I think that they kept those conversations private while they were married. And then when they were divorced, there was less of a like necessity to.
Yeah.
And I
That's
actually kind of
understandable. That's
followed,
understandable.
yeah, yeah. I kind of followed in my dad's footsteps, honestly. I did not really believe in God. Um,
Like through your later teens and years?
yeah, so I want to say that it wasn't until college that I pursued any form of like faith or interest in learning about it. I
No,
didn't
why?
have that. I really had an identity in school, and I had my life set out for me in my own head, and so I had no need for any sort of higher purpose. I was really good at school. I was really like, you'd call me like a smart kid. It was mainly just
So
because
your
I was really
identity was
driven.
academics.
Yeah, and so I didn't have room in my mind for like thinking about God. I just was like, I need to go to school and do school. And I also kind of like bought into my dad's logic at the time where he was like, I don't think that it fits with science. I think it's counterintuitive. And I agreed at the time of like, I don't really see how a creator can align with evolution and things like that. So I would say that from the majority of childhood and my teenage years, I was pretty comfortable as an atheist in my mindset. There was like a brief period of time where I kind of thought about developing some sort of like broader belief. And then I was like, I don't have time for this. I need to do
Yeah.
schoolwork. I was very, very focused.
That's interesting. So then there
Yeah.
was a shift.
Yes, yeah. So it absolutely goes back to that identity question. I think for a lot of people, finding faith when you didn't grow up believing it can be like, it can come about from a search for purpose and a search for identity, especially in my generation. I know that Gen Z cares a lot about identity. And that's what it was for me, is growing up, I really had a firm identity. I was really good at school. I really enjoyed school. Obviously, I still do. And I like desperately wanted to be the best. And I was good at it. And so I was pretty high up there. I definitely had people who were better than me at school, but like I was, in the top of my class in high school. And I was kind of on track to go to a really good college. And that was my goal. Like that was my whole purpose in life, was I want to get into a good college and I want to like be the best. And I spent most of my time doing homework, or I was on the debate team. And so I'd spend my weekends at tournaments and my weekdays prepping. And that was like my whole life. And so the shift came in college when I actually kind of achieved my life's purpose at the ripe age of 18. I got into college. That was my goal.
Yeah.
And I did it. And all of a sudden, like everything that had been my whole identity and goal, like was accomplished.
So you sort of hit a wall, hey? That's interesting.
Yeah. And I think that it's kind of that idea of like, when you achieve your goals, you have to come up with new ones. If you get every dream that you could possibly dream of, you're always going to want something else. We're
Right.
never really content where we are. And so when my goal was so small and like my identity was so constrained to just this one thing of getting into college, and I did it, that I was like completely
Now what?
left without a purpose. And
Right.
I didn't even have hobbies or anything, because I just spent all of my time studying and trying to get into school.
So
I didn't
what
know what my
school did you
interests
start out
were.
as a freshman?
I went to Boston University, which
Okay.
is a great school. I'm so
Yeah.
grateful for that education. It was like, I loved being there. I have no regrets. So like I don't blame the school or anything for my
Yeah.
loss
And
of
then Boston is
identity.
very open and liberal. Like, so, being atheist would be totally fine there.
Yeah, yeah, it was completely comfortable. I'm sure that I was in the minority eventually when I did start going to church, but it's a really unique culture out there where religion isn't talked about. And so even if it's like a liberal kind of atheist leaning school, nobody's walking around openly criticizing churchgoers or anything. It's
Right.
just not a conversation anyone's having. You'd never know if the person that you hang out with during class goes to church or not.
Interesting. So there's just not a lot of religious conversations.
Yeah, yeah. And it's something that I had a professor point out once in a conversation in class. We were sitting kind of like Socratic seminar style, anybody could contribute. And he made the point of saying, if you think about how you would introduce a person, say like you're introducing two friends of yours, what do you say about them? You might say, like, this is my friend XYZ. This is what he's majoring in. This is maybe what state he's from. He's nice, but you're not going to come out and say, this is who he voted for in the election,
Right.
or this is what church he goes to. And if you lived somewhere else, that might be something you said. If you lived in a more religious community, you might say, this is my friend. He goes to this church, because
True.
that's more of an identifier elsewhere. And it wasn't in Boston.
Interesting. So you did your whole undergraduate there.
Yeah, I did all 4 years there. And that was definitely like the place where I started to go to church first and then also kind of develop faith after,
So
which is ironic.
yeah, it is. So did you feel a nudge? Like, do you feel like maybe that was the hand of God nudging you to, hey, there's more to your life than academics?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
mean,
what did that
in
process look like, and how did
retrospect,
you find a church?
yeah, yeah. In retrospect, it's a lot more obvious. Sometimes when you look back on your life, it's like, oh my goodness,
But at
of
the time, it's
course.
not. Yeah.
Yeah. And so at the time, for me, what it felt like is I was facing this loss of identity. I didn't really know what to do with myself. I didn't know how to make friends. There's all these clubs, but they're all interest based, like if you're into theater, if you're into skiing. And I had no interests because my whole identity had been school. And so I didn't know how to meet people, how to find things I enjoyed. I had no greater purpose in life. I was just struggling. And at the back of my mind, there was this idea of like, I knew a couple kids in high school that went to church and they always seemed really happy. Maybe if I go to church, I'll be happy too. And that was like really all it felt like at the time, was just this surface level of, I just want to find something to do and some sort of purpose and identity. And they
But
seemed to have
don't you
it
think it's
figured
kind of
out.
cool how that was just a little nudge? Because if the Lord had been like in
Yeah.
your face about religion, you'd have been like, no, that's not my thing.
Yeah.
But to have it be this subtle little thought in your mind, oh, these kids were
Hmm.
happy. Maybe I could find this identity. I think that's so fascinating. Like the Lord knew, right? He knew Zoe. He knew what would
Yeah.
touch your heart. He knew that if you pushed too hard, you'd turn and run away. So
Hmm.
that's really fascinating. So how did you decide what church to go to? And how did that feel? And what did that look like those first few weeks?
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely like a question of proximity. In retrospect, I can look back and say that was the Holy Spirit kind of nudging me, like, hey, maybe you should go to church. And so I just kind of Googled churches close by. I didn't have a car, it's the middle of the city. And so I
Sure.
just picked the closest one. There was a Catholic center on my campus, and it was called the Newman Catholic Center. They're on a lot of college campuses. They're owned by the Catholic Church, and they're meant to be like specifically for undergrads, kind of like a church community that
Okay.
isn't an entire parish or congregation or whatever term you're used to. It's
Kind of what you're
just for
looking for though, right? A
undergrads.
little community, right?
Yeah, and so it's a way to meet people, and like it's like your own little building. It was a really cute brownstone, and they had like a Keurig so you could go in and make coffee or hot cocoa or whatever, and they'd have meals once a week where they'd make dinner for everybody,
Oh,
and you could go and take a nap in one of the bean bags. And so it's like this little tiny bubble in a big city where you feel comfortable, where people are welcoming. And then on
and they're all
top of
your
that,
age.
also, there's shared values, they're your age, all of that. Yeah. And so that's what I found. And I went to school right when COVID happened. And so I was a
Oh,
freshman when schools shut down. And so that church ended up being like really, really generous with me. They offered me a job, even though I had like literally walked in one day and been like, I haven't been to church in years. I never got confirmed in the Catholic Church. Like, I'm not a full-fledged member. I just, I'm here. And they were like, great. Do you want a job?
Wow.
So they were really generous with me. And so during COVID, they employed me just to make sure that they followed university policies with masks and stuff. And then after COVID kind of subsided, they kept me on as just like a front door greeter. But again, absolutely a God moment of you wouldn't necessarily like look at a random stranger and offer them a job, but they were the like reason that I never gave up on going to church even before I had developed any sort of faith. Like I had a reason to be surrounded by other people with those values, even if I wasn't strong in them. Just being at the building as an employee, I was having conversations and I was making friendships
And
and
people were
like getting to
caring
know
about
them.
you,
Yeah,
right? Like you
yeah.
had a
So,
community now of Christian believers, right? Like,
yeah. So it was absolutely just like this total God moment of I don't know who was listening to the Holy Spirit that day, but he convinced one of them to offer me a job. And it
wow.
was absolutely like a pivotal thing for me.
And so you went regularly then
Hmm.
to weeknight stuff, Sunday stuff, all the things. You were totally immersing yourself in that community.
Yeah, yeah. And I was doing it even before I knew if I believed in it, which was kind of the big thing for me is that there's a parable in the Bible of like seeds falling in soil. And if the seed falls in good soil, it's going to take root and grow.
Yeah,
But there's also seeds that fall in shallow soil and they sprout, but then they don't have roots and so they shrivel up. And I
right.
think that that experience was like allowing me to put down roots and grow my faith and like keep me surrounded in people that would teach me and guide me and like model things for me without like burning out from it really
Right.
fast. And so it allowed me to grow roots. And like it really did take a long time. It's not like I walked in one day and all of a sudden had faith and everything. I definitely was like kind of living two lives in
Sure.
some ways. Like I was making friends on my dorm floor. They're still really close friends of mine. I joined a sorority, and so I was like going to parties a lot. And then I was also pursuing like this whole church thing kind of
Were you making
conceptually.
friends? Were you making friends at the church as well?
Yes, yeah, I did make some friends at the church. And so it was kind of just like I was trying all sorts of things to find
Sure.
purpose and hobbies and things like that. And church was one of many avenues at the time.
Yeah. Well, you were just trying to find your path, right?
Yeah, yeah. And, faith is not an instantaneous thing. It's not just
No,
kind of like this on or off switch.
it's literally
There's,
a lifelong process. And it
yeah,
waxes
yeah.
and wanes, right? Like even
Hmm.
even me at my age, I have times where I'm much more faithful and diligent and times where I'm a little more apathetic. And I'm like,
Hmm.
"Oh, Sheila, pull up your socks." Like, and I think that's very normal. I think that's the natural
Hmm.
man, right? Is the waxing and waning. And you were young, I mean, 18 years old,
Hmm.
you're just trying to figure out where do I fit in and what is my goal? What is my life plan? So you
Yeah.
stuck with that congregation of young people in the Catholic Church for your whole undergraduate time?
Yeah, yeah. And I want to say that like by my second year, I really had kind of developed a faith of some sort. I had started to grapple with the question of do I believe in God and do I believe that this fits with my worldview? Does it makes sense? Does this seem logical? And so it took me a good year, but by that second year, I had started like really giving it an honest shot of
What does that
like,
mean, giving it an honest shot? What were you doing though
yeah,
to gain faith?
yeah. And I had decided like I'm gonna try this. If I'm really gonna be attempting to go to church, then it's not just showing up on Sunday. It's also reading the Bible. It's also praying and figuring out if I'm talking to myself or if I really believe that someone's listening.
Now,
And
when you were
so,
praying, I know in the Catholic Church has a lot of set prayers. Were you
mhm.
just doing those or were you sort of talking to God on your own, a mixture of the both? Or what were you doing for prayer?
No, I was doing both. It's definitely like encouraged to do both and have your own
Okay.
conversation with God. The set prayers are really useful if you are new, I want to say. It's great
Okay.
for meditating. Sometimes when you like don't know what to say, you
Right.
can just sit and think about some sort of like conceptual thing and like an intention. And then that recited prayer allows you to focus.
Well, and it
But
pretty gives you, in the beginning, you feel weird about it, and
mhm,
it feels weird you just talking to whatever. I mean,
mhm,
for those of us that have prayed our whole lives, it's not a big deal, but I can imagine if you've never prayed before, it might feel weird and awkward, you know what to say. So those set prayers, like you say, sort of give you a starting point and
yeah.
sort of open your, you know, your mind and your heart and your voice to
Mhm.
prayer.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was that, and then also the missionaries and the people who were like employed at the church to help us with, just faith questions. They were really encouraging me to like just try it out. There's no obligation to be perfect. You can just sit down and be like, okay, hi God, I'm here. I don't know what to say, but I'm trying, and that's how you
Yes.
can start. You don't need to have this like perfect eloquent prayer. And so I was learning to do that. And that was honestly the way that I came to really believe in God. Is I had this transition from I feel awkward, I feel like I'm talking to myself, I don't even know if anyone's listening, to actually sitting down in prayer. And there was a day where I was frustrated about something. I don't even remember what. But I sat down and I was like, I'm going to pray. And in my prayer, I said, God, I'm actually really frustrated with you right now. Like everything's going wrong. I'm really angry. Like, why are you putting me through this and like just making all of this happen? What's the point? And, then I sat for a second and I realized, you can't be angry with someone that doesn't exist. And so the fact that I had sat there and said, God, I'm angry with you, meant that I really believed there was someone to blame, that he was at fault for something, which meant that he had done something. He was real.
Which
And
meant you
so even,
believed. So logically, it
yeah,
made sense. And so again, a tender mercy from God is like, I know how Zoe's brain works.
yeah.
And for you to be mad, and maybe he was silent for that reason, so that you could
Hmm.
be mad. It's such an interesting logical process. I never thought about it
Hmm.
like that. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And so even though it was like in part like a negative thing, you don't feel like you're supposed to be mad at God. You're definitely allowed to be mad at God.
For
And
sure.
it was like this transformational thing of, oh my goodness, I'm mad at him. He's there. Like, that's great.
Wow. So that's kind of when it shifted for you.
Yeah, yeah. And with belief, it's not just believing that he exists, it's also believing in his promises and his commands. And that was a big, big change for me. Of if I actually do believe that he's there, then I also believe everything he did for me and everything he wants for me and everything I'm doing to get in the way of that.
Right.
That I should probably change. Like there's a lifestyle shift there of like, now I want to live for him, not just
Wow. So it became a
believe in
big
him.
deal.
Yeah, yeah, it
That's a
definitely
big
did.
shift for a young person in sororities and
Hmm.
all the things and in the parties, and
Hmm.
the college life is not
Hmm.
often conducive to a religious life, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And so you
Um,
shifted.
it was definitely a big shift. I did not quit drinking cold turkey, but what I did do is in the Catholic Church and some other denominations, they observe Lent, which is the 40 days leading up to Easter. And
Right.
it's this really like solemn observance of the weight of Christ's crucifixion
And the
and
sacrifice, right?
the sacrifice he made. And so Easter is a time to like celebrate and rejoice. So Lent is the time leading up to it of understanding what Christ went through, like what Jesus, the man on earth, had to suffer in order for us to be able to celebrate on Easter that Jesus Christ is risen.
Right.
And people tend to sacrifice something or give things up. There are also like fasting from food kind of things that people will do.
Like a
For
Ramadan type thing.
yeah, but because it's 40 days, you don't really just fast from food for 40
Right.
straight
Yeah.
days. Even though Jesus did do that.
Yeah.
But
No,
we
we're not
don't.
Jesus.
We are not Jesus.
Yeah, and people take Lent very seriously. It's a very
Yes.
deeply spiritual tradition, holiday, whatever, observance,
Yeah.
like, so you
Yeah.
did that then.
Yeah, and I knew a lot of people were trying to just give up something that, even if it wasn't necessarily a bad thing, in its absence they would think of God. And so I knew
Right.
people that gave up like multitasking.
Oh,
And so if you're eating dinner, you are not on your phone, you're not watching TV, you're not listening to music, like you're eating dinner and you're giving appreciation to each individual action you do. And I knew people that gave up jaywalking, which is really funny because I mean, it's kind of the perfect thing because when you're waiting for that light to turn, everyone else is crossing, but you have time to sit and pray instead.
you're right. That's really an
Yeah.
interesting way to look at it.
Yeah. But I gave up alcohol for that. And that was like my big kind of test for myself to see if I could do something countercultural in a way of like all my friends drink. We socialize and drink a lot. Can I do something that like your average college student wouldn't do and still like have friends and
Right.
have joy in life and have fun? And it ended up being, you know, like a really good realization for me that it wasn't that big of a deal to
Yes, that
stop
you could
drinking.
still have fun and not drink.
Yeah. And like my friends didn't think any less of me. They were just as fun to hang out with without drinking as they were drinking. Like
Well,
they
especially
didn't give up
because you kind
drinking,
of had
but
an excuse in the beginning because it was
Mhm.
Lent. You're like, I'm going to do this for Lent,
Yeah.
so nobody's going to question that. Whereas if you
Yeah.
might have just gone in and said, "Hey, I'm not drinking now," they might have
Mhm.
been a little bit more aggressive in their questioning, right?
Yeah, yeah. And they were wonderful. Like, we'd be hanging out as a group, and somebody would be offering people drinks, and someone would say, "Oh, Zoe, do you want a beer?" And someone else would jump in and be like, "You can't ask her that. Don't
That's
offer her that. It's
awesome.
Lent."
Yeah.
And so it was kind of a realization of like, my friendships are not tied to alcohol. They are still my friends with or without. They're just as fun to hang out with when I'm not drinking. And they don't, you know, think I'm boring because I'm
Right.
not. And I also don't feel like I'm missing out on anything. Like, I'm
So were
still
you able to
doing all the
continue
social
that?
things.
Yeah. So were you able to continue that then after Lent? You just kind of let it keep going?
I did go back to drinking after Lent, but it was definitely at like much more diminished amounts. I didn't go to bars. I'd usually sit that out if friends were going to bars. The only time I really drank is if we were at someone's home and I would like hold something in my hand and have one or two, but I stopped getting drunk and then I did it again the following year. And so that was like my junior and my senior year when I gave up
Okay.
alcohol for Lent. And I had gotten to this point of like my friends were going out and I was saying like, you know, I'll just hang out with you for a movie night instead of at a bar. It's really expensive. I really don't like it. I'm happy to have a drink with you like in your apartment. But I was kind of like just I was doing like not getting drunk, but I didn't mind drinking at the
Yeah.
time.
But that shift, you were making that shift. Again,
Mhm.
I feel like that's the hand of God too. He knew
Mhm.
that you needed to make this shift slowly and gradually, doing Lent,
Mhm.
and so it's so fascinating how the Lord works. Okay, let's
Yeah.
fast forward a little bit
Mhm.
to how did you come to find the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? And what did that look like, that conversion, and got involved in that and all the things?
Yeah, yeah. That's definitely like entirely credit to God. I don't know how on earth he orchestrated all of that, but I moved to Utah after I graduated college. I got into a PhD program here, and it was one of the best in the country for the specific field I'm in. And so it
Okay,
was
so to say,
just
moving from
so
Boston to
exciting.
Utah is kind of a big deal.
Yeah, yeah. And so it was very much just because of school. I did not know a soul out here when I moved.
Had you ever heard of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints before? Or Mormons, I guess, maybe.
Very, very minimally. I
So
had
not much.
known a couple members of the Latter-day Saint Church like in high school, and I just lumped them in with all the Christian kids that all
Right,
hung out together that I wasn't a part of because I didn't go to church and we didn't socialize with each other.
right,
But like in high school, my association with them is like they're just one of the other Christian denominations that they're all one and the same at the time.
right.
Even, you know, my first few years in college, even though I was going to church, I didn't have that much understanding of the differences between denominations. And
Sure.
so it was just all kind of lumped in together in my mind. And to some extent, I feel like that was problematic for me moving to Utah because, member of the church or not, everyone has an opinion out here about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter day Saints. And you have to like form an opinion really fast, because
And you didn't
otherwise
have
people are going
one,
to
right?
force theirs. Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't
Yeah.
have one when you first moved there.
And so you just got to pick one, because people are going to force theirs on you if you don't. But I think that I don't want to say that I regret things, because I really do believe that it's all part of God's plan. But there are definitely things that like I'm not really proud of that were part of the path that led me here. Academia is sometimes hostile to religion in general. That's not to say that there aren't lots of really like powerful believers, like really strong faiths in academia. And that's not to even say that Christianity is the minority. It's just that the like anti-religious voices can be very vocal and loud. And I found that that was the case moving to Utah. At my university, a lot of my peers were just very opposed to any form of religion, Christianity or otherwise.
And I would
And
suspect in Utah, probably even more vehemently than other places, because you're either a member of
yeah,
the church, or if you don't like the church, maybe you really don't like the church and you have a really strong opinion.
yeah. And so I had come from this environment where we just didn't talk about religion unless you were actively at church. And
Right.
I had walked into an environment where everybody's got thoughts and they are comfortable sharing them at any point to anyone who's willing to listen.
Well, that was weird for
And
you.
it was really weird for me, and it was very uncomfortable for me, because I was not a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I was attending initially a Catholic church at the time, and I was surrounded by people who just really did not like the idea of God. And there are a lot of comments that I would get, not necessarily directed at me, but people didn't know if I was religious or not. They just were saying it about like Christians just believe in a sky daddy, and sort of like
Oh,
derogatory,
interesting.
demeaning things of like it's just this magical fantasy of people who don't understand science.
And how did you feel when they said that? Were you kind of like, wait a minute, I actually do believe in God? Or did it sway you a little?
No, I was never really swayed by that argument, because I had spent so much time building like my logical belief. Like, does this actually make sense? Is it more than just a feeling? I had taken so much time trying to figure out if I was really convinced of God, that I had already walked through all of those arguments myself. I had already walked through the, oh, this is just silly, like you can't prove it. I'd already had those thoughts and worked my way through them. And so I wasn't swayed so much as I was just uncomfortable figuring out where the line was between defending people in general who believe in beliefs of whatever form, defending my own beliefs, and also not forcing my beliefs on others, because I'm still in this academic environment where there's like a separation of religion and education. I'm an
Right.
educator, I teach students. I can't tell them what to believe. That can't be part of my biases. Like, I'm not really supposed to talk about my beliefs at school because it's a workplace.
Right.
Other than like, obviously, I'm allowed to say that I go to church, but I'm not supposed to proselytize or evangelize or anything. And so it was more of just this question of like, I feel compelled to defend my beliefs because I want to defend God. He's important. My whole identity is in the fact that I think that Jesus Christ loves us.
So by now
It,
you'd made a complete shift.
yeah, yeah. And it hurts to hear people insult him. But at the same time, we are not entirely obligated in every situation to be his warrior with a sword. We don't need to cut down everybody who
Right. Right.
insults him. And so I found it was a bit of a transition, but I had to find where I felt comfortable defending and where I felt comfortable being quiet. There were moments where I definitely did step in. There were instances where I'd hear grad students like reading a religious scripture and making fun of it in a public space. And I would step in and say, like, hey, you can be reported for this. You have undergrads nearby. You're in a position of power. This is a fireable offense. You cannot have this conversation in public in your
Good for
position.
you. Good for you.
Yeah. And, I wasn't saying, like, hey, I'm offended necessarily. I wasn't arguing about the beliefs, but I was stepping in and saying, like,
Yeah.
we have an obligation to allow students to have different beliefs from you.
Yeah. So where did the church come in? Like how did
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
Yeah. So with that, because school was very hostile to my beliefs, I turned and found community in Christian churches. And I struggled to find community in the Catholic Church, and I didn't have like a strong compulsion to specifically be at that denomination. So I ended up at an evangelical church that was really big. It was like a mega church size that just had a really strong young adult presence so that I could make friends. And that church was very anti-Mormon, anti-Church of Jesus Christ of
Wow.
Latter-day
Okay.
Saints.
Wow.
Yeah. And so there was this, opportunity to make friends, find community, pursue my faith, and get involved. And I also had no opinion about the Mormon church. And so I just kind of accepted what they taught. And I accepted their views as like authority figures because they were pastors and they were church leaders. And they had like a class on deconstructing LDS beliefs, which I never attended, but I got the gist of it just in conversation from other people. They were very much of the camp of Christians that believe that if you don't believe specific things about the gospel, then you don't believe in the right Jesus, because the right Jesus would have different teachings. And so because the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints doesn't believe in the Trinity, the concept that the Heavenly Father, Jesus Christ, and Holy Spirit are the same, like, ontological substance, same soul,
Right.
even though they're all God. Because the church rejects that, a lot of other Christians who do believe in the Trinity say, well, you don't believe in the right Jesus because you don't believe in what he is. You don't believe that he and the Heavenly Father are
That's a big
one. So that's a
separating
different
point.
person.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
big separating point. And this evangelical church did obviously believe in the Trinity.
Mm-hmm.
Thus, they bashed the LDS church for us
Yeah.
believing in three separate personages.
Yeah. And so in the beginning, I really just kind of accepted that and adopted that. And I was like, you're right. They believe in a very different concept, so it can't be the same person. And so they're missing out on the gospel. And there were some compelling and completely valid stories from people who had had bad experiences in the church, or people who had come from like fundamentalist polygamy.
Oh,
And so in leaving that, they also associated the LDS church with
that.
those
Yeah.
fundamentalist churches, even though they're not really the same.
No.
It was just all one belief kind of lumped in together.
They didn't understand the difference of the fundamentalist church versus the full-on Latter-day Saint church. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
And you didn't
a
know
lot
that
of
because you
that,
didn't have any background knowledge of that.
yeah. So a lot of the like anti-Mormon sentiment was driven by genuine like abusive experiences that people had had, whether through the fundamentalist church or just poor representatives of the Latter-day Saint church, that like really drove them to say like, this is how evil the Latter-day Saint church is because of all of these experiences that people have in it. And I don't want to
So
take
sad
away
that
from
you would
those
lump
experiences.
the whole church based on a few people's experiences. It's really unfortunate.
Yeah. And so I never want to take away from those experiences. Like, people truly did experience abuse. And a lot of times it was under the guise of, well, this is what our church teaches, and like using it
Especially in those
you.
fundamentalist religions, there was a lot of that going on. And if you don't know the difference, then you're like, well, everyone is like that. Women are oppressed. There's a lot of abuse, right? Which is so not true. But you didn't know that.
Yeah. And so the big turning point for me was when all of the things that church was using against the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints became things that they started to do. And it was the realization that there is a difference between the fruit of people and the fruit of a church.
Yeah, like the people versus the doctrine, right?
Yeah. And so I realized that the church itself that I was at had wonderful people, but really dangerous policies and beliefs. And that was kind of what motivated me to say, okay, I've heard about really bad fruit from people in the Mormon church, but what are the policies and beliefs and the fruit of those in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?
And if you're a Christian, why are you bashing these people? Should we not give them grace? Should we not try to come to understanding? Did you ever have those feelings?
Yeah. One of the like really big things that kind of started to push me away from that church is I was doing my own independent research, trying to grow in my faith and understand more about like the meaning of things in the Bible and the historical parts of it and the context. And I read a book about like the original documents before it was compiled into the Bible, like what was being passed around to the early believers, what did they have access to, what got like combined and separated, were there other sources that were lost? And
you went really deep dive into the academic side, right?
Which, I mean, is exactly how God speaks to me, because he knows that that's what I'm passionate about and how I love to learn. And so, of course, God is going to teach me these lessons through the books I read.
Sure, academically.
Yeah. But I had this big realization where I was like, you know, the huge argument against the LDS Church is the Trinity. You know, Mormons don't believe in the Trinity, so they're not Christian, was that whole argument. And the argument for the Trinity is in the Bible. There's specific verses that you can point to and say, well, look, like this implies that Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit are one in substance, not just purpose. And so because of this specific line in the Bible, if you compare it to this other line in the Bible, it just makes sense. I realized that's all well and good. I totally accept that that argument can be made, but the original believers didn't have every book of the Bible. They just had some of them and the word of mouth. So they probably didn't understand that. They didn't have that like textual analysis that we do. And yet there are instances in the gospel where Jesus said to people, by your faith, you've been saved. And he had definitely not broken down the like intricacies of his relationship with the Father. He had just come to tell them, like, I'm here to save you, and I'm here to save your soul. Believe in me, believe that I am the Messiah, and that will save you. And that was enough. And it was that kind of like understanding that I came to where I was like, we are putting so many restrictions on salvation that you're like required to be an expert on Jesus and the Bible just to be saved. Because if you get one thing wrong, then you don't believe in the right Jesus anymore.
Which makes no sense, right? It's like, not everyone's as intellectual as you are.
Yeah, honestly, you know what? I don't want to be a genius just for God to love me.
Right?
He understands that we are all capable of believing different things. We all have access to different parts of information. Not everyone gets the whole Bible. Some people just receive a missionary telling them, and that's got to be good enough because they don't have it translated into their language yet.
And so you're in this whole deep dive, right? And so then when did that shift come to be like, okay, wait a minute. Was it a person? Was it missionaries? Like what got you into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?
It took leaving my old church to go into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Oh, you did?
It was pushing back about the beliefs on Mormonism that like got me kicked out.
Oh, so you had conversations about defending the Mormon Church and people didn't like that. And so they literally kicked you out of their church?
There were other reasons. They had a policy on like reporting about child welfare that I disagreed with because I thought it broke the law. And so they were, you know, kind of being defensive about that. They wanted us to
lots of little things that kind of pushed you towards searching for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Did you just want to be like, I actually want to know what this church believes because they've been bashing it for so long. I actually want to know, like intellectually.
Yeah, there was definitely like an aspect of like indignation where I was like, you guys are doing all of the things that you say this other church does that make it evil. I just want to know, do they actually do that? Or are you just projecting?
Right.
Because you're saying that they're abusive and controlling. But as soon as I kind of questioned whether or not I thought Mormons were Christian, which is not an essential doctrine, I wasn't even attending the LDS Church. I just thought they might be Christian. All of a sudden, I was being like shunned and people cut contact with me and didn't want to be my friend anymore just because I had voiced that maybe Mormons could be Christian.
So how did you walk into it? Did you just look up a church and walk into one day?
Yeah. I looked up the closest one. I walked in, and I mean, the big difference at the time between my old church and the LDS ward that I walked into is I was used to walking into like 1,000, 2,000 person services where you could just kind of slip in anonymously and slip
Right.
out. And the minute I stepped foot in my local ward building, someone walked right up to me and they were like, "I've never seen you here before.
Now, was
Hi,
this a
welcome."
family ward or was this a YSA ward?
This was a family ward, mainly just because the YSA was like 2 blocks further away.
Yeah, well, proximity is a thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. And people were so nice and welcoming, which, I mean, you can be nice and welcoming anywhere. But
Sure.
the things that really stood out to me is one, at the beginning of services on Sunday, sometimes there are announcements, and I heard things like, "We have been asked to help this property clear out some dead trees and brush. We're looking for some volunteers who would be willing to help with that on the weekend." And the idea of just anybody can come in and serve and help, and you don't need to sign a code of conduct and a dating policy just to be allowed to help other people was crazy to me. Like, oh, I can just be helpful. I don't need to prove my belief to also help others.
Wow. So you love that part, the service part, the freedom part, the accepting.
And also, there was no pastor giving a sermon, which
was probably really weird for you.
was really weird. And it was incredible because you just have two people from the church community every week get up on Sunday and give a talk. And sometimes they're really bad and sometimes they're really, really good. And so you don't know what you're going to get. You can't like assume that you're going to learn a ton if you get a bad speaker, just, someone who doesn't know a lot. But you get a different person each time, and you're not going to church for the purpose of hearing them talk.
Right.
And that's a really big difference from like an evangelical church where a huge part of the church service is hearing a pastor give a sermon every week. And it's usually the same one or two pastors. And a lot of the really popular ones are popular because their pastors are charismatic speakers. And
Right.
they're really interesting to listen to, and they make it fun and entertaining, and you feel like you're learning so much. And so you're going to church partially because you believe in God and you care about worshiping him, but also partially you're going to that specific church because you want to hear that pastor speak.
Right.
Because you want to learn, but
yeah, but like you say, you were kind of drawn to them. So when you walked into the church for the first time, did you feel anything? Like, was it a different feeling? Like, where did you see God kind of in those first few months of attending? So when you went that first week, did you be like, "Hey, I want to go again," or what was that like?
Yeah, I basically walked in one day and I just never looked back. I went every single week after that. The things
And at
that,
what point did they realize that you weren't even a member of the church?
Day one.
Oh, day one. Did you say, "Hey, I'm not of this faith. I just want to find out about you"?
Yeah. They asked me, they were like, "Oh, welcome. Are you new to the neighborhood?" And I was like, "No, I've lived here for a while. I'm just not Mormon." There was a lady who was like, "Well, are you Christian?" And somebody next to her went, "Oh, of course she's a Christian. She's wearing a cross."
Oh, yes.
So they were just really excited to get to know me, and they were like, "What made you come in here?" And I was like, "Honestly, I wanted to see it for myself instead of other people's opinions." And there was a really, really lovely story that I learned later, but the first woman to greet me, she's incredible. We're very close friends now, but that month, it was like the first of the month, and she had committed in the new year to find a single person to introduce to the missionaries for missionary lessons.
Wow.
And it was the start of March. And so we were 2 months into the year, and she was feeling kind of defeated. She was like, "This is my goal for the year. This is my promise to God that I was going to do this. And I haven't found a single person. Like, nobody's taken me up on the offer yet. Like, what do I do next, God? How do I reach people? Who do I go out and serve? Like, who do I invite?" And in I walk, like the next day, and she's like, "I guess I didn't need to go out. God brought you right to me."
Oh, that's so sweet. So you were an answer to her prayer.
Yeah, and she was an answer to mine because she set up missionary lessons for me. She hosted them at her house. Her and her husband had me over every week so that I could meet with the missionaries and also like talk through a lot of the questions that sometimes the missionaries couldn't answer.
Yeah. Because
every
you probably
missionary.
had more than most because you had done so
Yeah.
much intellectual research. Was there a specific moment, Zoe, during the missionary discussions where you really felt like God manifest, like the Holy Ghost was testifying of truth to you that you could share?
I think that there were like a couple moments where I really just felt the Holy Spirit kind of for the first time, not just intellectually, but also just kind of emotionally in a
Like
way
in your
of
soul?
like, this just feels true and right. And
What did that feel like? Can you describe it?
it felt like kindness, honestly. I had spent so much time, and I still do. I still absolutely believe that faith is partially intellectual and like you should
Yes.
really believe it's true. But I had spent so much time just kind of like building my understanding and knowledge and also building good habits, but not necessarily just any like emotional peace in my faith. That even when I have doubts, I don't need to fix them right away. I can just sit in it and I trust that God will have an answer. And that was something that, the missionaries, I think in their humility and meekness, really made clear to me that they were willing to sit down with me and hear me like kind of pull apart questions about really deep theological discussions and be like, I need this to make sense for me to actually believe in your church. If I'm really going to join your church, I need you to make this make sense. And for them to be willing to sit down and be like, you know more about that topic than we do, and we really want to get an answer for you because we believe this is true. So we
So they had to
want this
really
to make
rely
sense.
on, yeah, they had to really rely on the Spirit. And for you
Yeah.
to come to that knowledge of waiting for the answer, that's actually spiritual
Mm-hmm.
maturity, right?
Yeah,
Like more
exactly.
so than
Yeah.
most people that are investigating the church would have, but you'd already spent so much time doing that.
Yeah, and they really taught me, like, just in like sitting down with them, the realization of it's okay if you don't have the answer right now.
Right.
It's okay if we don't have the answer for you because we're going to go look for you. But also, it's okay if you give it some time and wait for God to answer it. Give it a week. We'll try and get an answer for you next week, but you might find the answer this week. Not in this exact moment that you ask the question, but just take some time to pray about it. And you never know, it might come to you anyways.
And did it often just come to you?
Yeah, it really did. A lot of
Yeah.
times, all I had to do was ask them and for them to say, I don't know. And it came together anyways. Even though they didn't have every answer, they had some. I'm not trying to
Yeah.
say that they knew nothing. Yeah. Yeah. It was so fast. I showed up in it was like March 1st. No, not March. I think it was February 1st. And I was baptized in April.
Wow. So when you knew, you knew.
Yeah, yeah. And like they had offered a little earlier, and I was like, I'm not ready. Like,
Not
I want to
ready.
be sure about this. And so they ended up, giving me the time and then kind of following up and being like, we're going to keep meeting with you. You keep asking us questions, and you get to decide when you want it. There was no pressure or no rush or anything. And then when I finally was like, okay, let's do it, they were like, well, it's conference weekend, but you can get baptized the second conference ends.
Oh, so you got baptized on conference weekend.
I did. I did.
And was that a
Sunday.
couple of years ago?
No, that was this year.
Just this year? Wow, good for you. Okay, Zoe, I have actually two questions. One quick one.
Hmm.
What did your parents think of it?
I think it's an ongoing conversation, honestly. My parents have the same apprehension with my current beliefs as they did with any previous belief I held, which is that they don't want me to be controlled.
Right.
And they have seen instances where churches can be really controlling. And kind of the assurance I'm able to give them is that there's so much less control over me in this church, in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, than there was in my super popular evangelical megachurch. Because there's no dating policy. If I dated someone that wasn't a member, it probably wouldn't be like encouraged because people really want me to be able to have a temple marriage. but nobody would say, well, you can't have a calling anymore.
No,
you're not
no.
trustworthy. There's no judgment.
And agency, we believe, is the greatest gift that God has given us.
Mm-hmm.
He's not going to force himself on you. He's not going to force the commandments on you. You get to choose the journey and the path that your life takes.
Yeah.
Decide you want God or not, right? Like that's what I love too about the gospel. And I've spent a lot of time the last 3 or 4 years pulling apart doctrine versus culture. As you will find in the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, especially in Utah, there's a lot of cultural stuff that's not necessarily doctrine. And so I've spent a lot of time, and I grew up in the church. So I think that's really valuable for your parents to recognize, hey, listen, I have agency to choose how I want to live my life and how much God I want to put in that. And I think for me as a parent, that would bring me peace. Be like, okay, you have your agency to choose. I'm good with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that they see that I have a lot more freedom and
you're happy.
I'm still the same person, and my beliefs haven't necessarily changed all that much, but the way I act on them have. And I think that there's better fruit in this than there was in my previous church.
Oh, Zoe, that's awesome. Okay, my one final quick question is, why do you think it's important to recognize the hand of God in your life?
I think that introspection matters. Even if you weren't religious and you didn't necessarily see it as God, it matters to reflect on what you've been through and what you've done. And the difference between just looking at like what you've been through and what you've done and kind of seeing patterns versus seeing God is that there's love when you recognize what God has done. A pattern is a coincidence, kind of seeing the way that your life played out. Partially it's agency, partially it's just, the hand that fate dealt you. But being able to look at your life and reflect and say, you know what, I didn't understand it at the time, but it is so obvious right now how much love God put into that situation, like how much reason that there was to see him. Even if I didn't at the time, even if I was blind to it, that he was right there holding my hand. And maybe it wasn't an easy situation, maybe it was pretty painful, but that doesn't mean that he was inflicting that pain on me. Actually, he's the reason that some of that pain was lifted. Being able to understand that no part of your life is loveless or alone or isolated is so important.
Oh, I love that. Well, Zoe, thank you so much for taking time today to come and talk with me. I truly appreciate it. So go follow It's Zoe's app on Instagram because she's super cute and super fun. Thanks, Zoe, so much.
Thank you so much, Sheila.
Thanks for listening. If you have an experience where you have seen the hand of God or your higher power in your life, I want to hear about it. Please send an email to Sheila@beyondcoincidence.com. Have a great day.